Shalom, everybody. Again, thank you guys for joining us, and everybody watching. Thank you for joining Assembly of Yahuah Wednesday night chapter study. We're going through the New Testament, Brit Hadashah. We're gonna break down. We're doing the double books, so we're on First and Second Corinthians. We're on 2 Corinthians chapter 8. This particular chapter has 24 verses, so we're gonna break it down in groups of eight verses at a time. Let me open it up. Does anybody want to read the first 8 verses for us? All right, Brother Paul, go ahead.
Shalom, brother. Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of Elohim bestowed on the called out assemblies of Macedonia, how that in a great trial of affliction the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberty. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the Kodashim. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave them their own selves to Yahuah and unto us by the will of Elohim. So much so that we desired Titus, that as he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace also. Did you say 6 verses, brother, or 8?
8 verses.
Okay. Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also. I speak not by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others, and to prove the sincerity of your love.
All right, brother, you wanna point out anything that stands out to you?
Just the thing that stood out for me was that in great trials of affliction and abundance, their joy and deep poverty abounded into the riches of their liberty. But also that giving themselves to Yahuwah under every circumstance.
Absolutely. Praise Yah. Praise Yah. So we're gonna look at this. Does anything stand out for anybody else before I give 2 cents? All right. So we're on 2 Corinthians chapter 8, first 8 verses. Now, he's speaking about a scenario that occurred with the called out ones from Macedonia. And I want to emphasize on what Brother Paul just pointed out as well, with the great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy, deep poverty abounding in the riches of their, and the King James says liberality, but when you look it up, is referring to purity, the riches of their purity, or the riches of their, let me see, sincerity, generosity. Basically, it's the liberality. The reason why it's called freedom or liberal is because they're doing something out of the freedom of their own decision. It's coming from their own will. And this is one of the things that Yah is really telling us to be concerned with. The well-being of another individual, sometimes over your own. Looking at it, what it says their deep poverty produced the riches of their generosity. You know, a lot of times we don't allow these circumstances that we're in to teach us lessons. So we become disgruntled. We start to complain and we start to murmur because we're looking at a circumstance as if the power of someone else could have changed the circumstance, but they're looking at their deep poverty as a situation or circumstance for Yah calling them to rely on him. Like what you said, brother, in verse 5, it says that they first gave their own selves to the master and then unto us by the will of Yah Elohim. You know, so this is the method. This is the method that has been missing for a long time. You know, even amongst the Israelites at Sinai, we see when Yah purposely did not give them food, rather than giving themselves to the master, giving themselves to Yah, they began to complain and murmur and point at a circumstance that they felt Moses should have changed. So I think this is I think a lot of times we can all relate to these circumstances, but also to be encouraged by the actual actions that the believers, the fellow believers in the past has done in righteousness. You know, I think this is very important for us to grasp as well. So them being in deep poverty, abounding in the riches of their purity. And there's a verse I wanted to point out in Proverbs, reminds me of this. I believe it's in Proverbs 21, verse 13. Proverbs 21, verse 13, it says, whoso stops his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. I think these are very important lessons, but also warnings, seeing how we reap, how we really reap what we sow. You know, it's not a karma thing. Just for people who don't understand what karma is. Karma is the dogma of reincarnation, simplified into something reincarnating back into your life, or it's the Hindu belief. That's where the word karma comes from. It's the Hindu belief that whatever you do in this life, in your next life to come, it will be in that life. But because of situations and circumstances, they use that term, which is from that belief, to refer to something happening in this life, from something that you also did in this life, you know, or from the past life, whatever that teaching may be. So we have to understand that sowing and reaping is not the same as karma. Karma is not the same as you will reap what you sow. You see, Yah is very much involved in the things that we do, and hearing our brothers cry out in need, we tend to self-preserve ourselves rather than sacrificing ourselves for the brethren. So, you know, so once again, looking at verse 2 of 2 Corinthians chapter 8, how in great trial and affliction the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their generosity. You see, all of these situations happening to them, and then they heard about what was happening to others, and they were willing to sacrifice what they had for them. And you know, this is very, very important. This is very important to us. This is what it means to lay down your life for the brethren. Yah doesn't need us to physically lay down our lives, like, you know, like be actually killed, but in a sense to kill pride, to kill selfishness, to kill self-preservation, like I mentioned earlier, and to sacrifice one's own needs for someone else that's in need. It could be the same need, you know, but Yah knows what to put on us, what to put on our hearts, you know. And but here's the thing, sometimes Yah, it's not about what Yah puts in our hearts, it's about the principles that Yah is teaching us in scripture, that he wants to put in our character. He doesn't want to always compel us by the moving of the Ruach. He wants our will to be, coincide, to be in agreement with the Spirit already. This is what he's developing in us. And I know that we could all relate, because there's things that when it comes to Yah, it's not even a question anymore. When it comes to prayer, or when it comes to studying the word, it's not even a question. It's like, let's do it. When can we do it? How long can we do it? How much more can we do it? You see, but this is not the case with all characteristics of Yah. So what he's doing is he's putting the Ruach in us, and he's using these trials and tribulations and afflictions to teach us to put these things into our characters. So it's not a second thought. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to make that clear. So with that being said, looking at the other instances, I'm looking at verse 7 and 8. And it says, therefore, as you abound in everything, and look at what he's emphasizing on. I know sometimes we see the bills coming in, we see these earthly stresses, but we're look at what he's calling abounding. It says, therefore, as we abound in everything, in faith, in utterance, and knowledge, and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that you abound in this favor also. I don't speak by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others, and to prove the sincerity of your love. Let me look up this word real quick. Just want to make sure. Right. So the forwardness, the forwardness is referring to the readiness or the speediness of others that he's pointing out. So he's not like, I'm not commanding anybody to do anything. This is something that I'm taking occasion on what they've done to point out, to show, to reveal the sincerity of your love, And I think that's affirmation. Sometimes that's affirmation. The scripture tells us to, let me see if I can find it. I want us to see these scriptures. All right. So there's scripture that talks about commendation or commending oneself. It says in here, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, which is coming soon. It says, for we dare not to make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. And I want to point that out because we are here. Yah has created the body to affirm and lift up and encourage and exhort one another to building up of the set apart ones. That's what it says in verse 4 of 2 Corinthians 8, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering or the serving to the set apart ones. This is what we're doing. We're serving one another, just as Messiah commanded us to serve one another. So when we're looking at what the body is created for, is to support one another. That's how it functions. If it's not supporting one another, then it's not functioning correctly. And if it's hindering or hurting one another, then it's actually a detriment to the body. So Messiah brings this out in Matthew 5, where he says, if your right hand offends you, to cut it off. If your right eye offends you, to cut it off. In referencing to the body, parts of the body sometimes may stray and offend, and a lot of times it may have to be removed in order to preserve the rest of the body. So we have to understand our purpose is not to look at ourselves and say, oh, you know what? Before I was pretty horrible, but now I'm not that horrible. That's commending yourself with yourself. There's never a moment in which you're looking at yourself as if you don't have a need. And yes, there is an acknowledgement that Yah has strengthened you because you boast in your weakness. Remember, Paul teaches us to boast in the weakness that we have, not so we can elevate and exalt and hold to high esteem Yah's power, his strength, his ability in us. So a lot of times, a lot of people, they hear statements like, oh, no, you're good, you're this, you're that, you're this. And even though we're supposed to lift up one another, we don't know how to utilize that gift of exhortation. It becomes flattery, or it becomes something else. And I think that I really believe that Yah wants us to understand the purity of the minds of these people, that while they were in affliction, while they were in deep poverty, that they did not focus on themselves at all. They focused on another person's need. And they didn't commend themselves, but they allowed Paul to commend them and to reveal what's in them by their own actions. And I think this is what would encourage someone much greater than just flattery, just saying how somebody's doing good with no real reason behind it, but to say what's actually being done as proof, as evidence that something is being done inside of a person is extremely encouraging. And I think we should learn how to exhort one another, in that way, rather than enabling one another to continue to do the same thing that we're trying to teach people not to do. So, with that being said, let's go to the next 8 verses. Does somebody want to read verse 9 to 16? All right, I'll read it. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9 to 16. It says, "For you know the esteem of our master Yahusha the Messiah, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that you through his poverty might be rich. And herein I give my advice, for this is beneficial for you, who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago. Now therefore perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which you have. For if there be first a willing mind, it is accepted according to that a man has, and not according to what you do not have. For I mean, not that the other men may be eased and you burdened, but by the equality, that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their lack, and that their abundance also may be a supply for your lack, that there may be equality. As it is written, he that gathers much had nothing left over, and he that gathered little had no lack. But thanks be to Elohim, which put the same earnest care into the heart of Titus on your behalf." All right. So I'm allowed, anybody wants to point anything out from those verses, let me know. All right. So looking at these verses, he's continuing to teach the lesson or emphasize on the lesson that we were just talking about. Um, he's talking to the people about that who a year ago he mentions in verse 10 that whatever they started a year ago, that they would allow or that they would pursue to execute the things that they wanted to do a year ago. This is very important. This is also very convicting to me. You know, the goals, the desires that you had on behalf of, you know, serving Yahuwah, serving Yahusha, the things that you wanted to do for him, that we also should perform it. Let me read verse 11 again. It says, now therefore perform the doing, that is, there was a readiness to desire. So there may be a performance also out of that which you have. So he's saying, be diligent to do the things that you desire. You know, it's good to have a desire to do something, but to actually do it is a fulfillment. And I think all of us is pretty sure on the action that Yah wants us to take. He definitely wants things to originate inside, which is what's being mentioned here. But he also wants us to perform the things that we know we should be doing, the things that we have learned from his word, the things that we are required to be done by his word and by the Ruach, you know. So he's saying in verse 12, for if there be first a willing mind, it is accepted, this is faith, to that a man has, and not according to what he doesn't have. So let's say you don't have the materials to do something, but your desire, a lot of times your desire, your faith behind something is what Yah accepts. You know, just like in Matthew 5, he talks about looking at a woman for lust, and how when we look at a woman for lust, it's accounted as adultery. What about Genesis 12? When Abraham believed, right, it was accounted for him for righteousness. It wasn't that when he actually did anything, but when he believed, it was counted to from righteousness. And when he did it, it was from that belief. It was a manifestation of that belief. And this is what he's telling us to do. But not only that, he's telling us not to do what we know we don't know how to do. Let me say that again. Not to do the things that you don't know how to do, but to focus on the things that you do know how to do. And then that's what he's referring to by equality. If you look at verse 14, let me see, verse 14 and 15, it says, but by the equality that now at this time your abundance may supply others' lack, and that their abundance may supply your lack, that there may be equality. And let me see if I can find a better word for equality. Right. Like a righteous likeness, a righteous unity, building each other up so that way we could all stand together. This is what it's referring to. And then look at verse 15. It says, as it is written, he that has gathered much had nothing over. He that has gathered little had no lack. Let me give you guys a pop quiz real quick. Where's that verse coming from? Anybody? It's coming from the manna, the dropping of the manna. It's coming from Exodus. When he commanded them to take what they needed or to utilize their resources to provide what they need. And those who gathered a certain amount, it provided for their needs and the needs of their families. And those who took a little, they had no need. It supplied exactly what they needed. And this is what he's telling us to do as a functional nation, as a functional kingdom of people, that we ought to provide one another's lack, that there would be no lack. If we provide one another's lack, there would be no lack. And I think this is very important for us to understand as a nation, like that we are following Yah. He is providing us with and equipping us with gifts to supply the set apart ones, to supply the called out assemblies with whatever is lacking. And the more that we as a body provide the lack of the other parts of the body, we would be a body with no lack. This is what he's trying to reveal to us. This is what Paul is taking the opportunity to emphasize on, that the lack is being met because the people are standing uprightly, and that they are providing for others and surrendering themselves and sacrificing themselves for one another, and no one is in lack. Everyone is abundant in the spiritual gifts and the character that Yah is putting in them by the Ruach. All right. I'm going to read the last 8 verses, verse 17 to 24. And it says, "For indeed he accepted the exhortation," referring to Titus. It says, "being more forward of his own accord, he went unto you," being more generous, being more generous. It says in verse 18, "and we have sent with him the brother whose praise in the good news throughout all the called out assemblies. And not that only, but who was also chosen by the called out assemblies to travel with us with this favor, which is served by us to the glory of the same master and the declaration of your ready mind. Avoiding this, that no man should blame us in this abundance which is administered by us, providing for honest things, not only in the sight of the master, but also in the sight of men. And we have sent with them our brother, whom we have oftentimes proved diligent in many things, but now much more diligent upon the great confidence which I have in you. Whether any do inquire of Titus, he is my partner and fellow helper concerning you, or our brethren be inquired of, they are the messengers of the called out assemblies and the glory of Messiah. Wherefore show them, and before the called out assemblies, the proof of your love and of your boasting on your behalf." So again, just another exhortation to the called out assemblies on the actions that they took when they received Titus, and not only when they received Titus, but receiving the message of Titus and acting on it, submitting themselves to the need that Titus told them about the other called out assemblies. And he's telling them not to take, verse 20, "avoiding this, that no man should blame us in this abundance which is administered by us." So the things that we're giving to you, that you don't give us that esteem, is different when you're exhorted in the things that Yah is using you for. But the esteem is something that he's trying to make sure that they don't go that far. There was a time when Paul and Barnabas went somewhere, they were preaching, and I believe that they started to, I'm not sure if he got bit by the snake at that time. Yes, he got bit by the snake, and then he didn't die, Paul. And when the people saw that he got bit by the snake and he didn't die, they came to him and they started to lift him up and esteem them as Greek gods. I think they called Barnabas Zeus. It says Jupiter in the book of Acts. And they called Paul Hermes. And when they were carrying them on their shoulders, holding them high, Paul ripped his clothes. He ripped his clothes, and he was just like, no, this is not the esteem that he would even dare to accept or even bother to call, rightfully his. Like, he is like, this is not what we should be entertaining. The lifting up of yourself is not what we should be entertaining. So I think this is the same emphasis on, focusing so much on Paul. He's telling you not to focus on Paul or Titus or the workers that's actually given these things to the people, but to focus on Yah as their provider. Also, he's also encouraging the people to accept those who labored with Paul, you know, and that happens a lot too. When sometimes when you have a ministry and everybody got like their favorite guy, and then everybody just wants to listen to that favorite guy. And Paul is like, no, Titus was with me. He was doing the same things, and pleased to receive Titus the same way, to receive Titus the same way that you would accept me. And these are the characteristics that the New Testament reveals to us about the Ruach. It's a demonstration of the Ruach and of the Torah inside of those people. How partiality is basically shunned naturally by a person who's completely surrendered in Yah. They don't want any type of glory. They don't want any type of favoritism. They don't want any of those things. You know, they lift up their brothers. They equip the people with what they need to go into the world and do the same exact thing that they're doing. This is what a body is supposed to function as. They're not supposed to just go to one person. They're not supposed to just go to the leadership. They're supposed to be filled with understanding from the Ruach by using the gifts of the teachers, and they're supposed to now perpetuate that to the others. And when you look at the book of Acts, most of these people that were doing a lot of these works were not even the 12. Like Philip was not a part of the 12 disciples. He was the evangelist. He was a different Philip. Stephen, those were the seven ministers that were chosen in Acts chapter, I believe, chapter 5 or 7. Stephen that was preaching, filled with the Ruach, Titus, Timothy, all these different people. Agabus was a prophet. Ananias, the one that gave Paul his sight. So many people outside of the 12 disciples that were prophets and that were teaching and doing the work. Aquila and Priscilla teaching Apollos. Apollos was known as being filled with the Ruach, and going to the synagogues preaching the truth. So we have to understand this is how the body looks. The body is not flocking to a couple leaders. The body is flocking to Yah. When they recognize that someone is being used, they flock to the truth, and then they get the truth, and then they give it. They go and give it to others. That's how we function together. If there's an issue, we lay it on a table. Acts 15, we lay it on a table. Even though there's order, there's leaders for order. This is a necessity for order to constantly be maintained so the people can function the way that they're supposed to function. And this is what Paul is trying to help the called out assemblies to do and perform. So I hope that was clear. So before we close, does anybody have anything they want to point out or reference or say? All right, praise Yah. All right, so this is basically the chapter of encouragement, showing the works of a group of people that laid down themselves during a harsh time for others, and also manifesting what was in them. He was also encouraging people that whatever they started out to do a year ago or before, that they also perform what they started out, what they promised Yah. This is another emphasis on the Torah's teaching about vows. When you say you're going to do something for Yah, we should follow through with it, and I'm guilty of that as well. I need to focus more on the things that Yah is telling me to do and not lose sight of those things because of affliction, But Yeah, I hope that this was a blessing. I hope that we would be, something that we could take away from this and apply to our daily lives. So thank you guys for coming. And if you have any questions, if you think of any questions, you can always send it to us or do the Q&As. But this Friday, we're going to have a study, a class on conflict resolution and how the body itself ought to maneuver or function during conflict. So it's going to be like a class. So of course, everybody could chime in if there's something to chime in about, so all right, praise Yah. Hope you guys have a blessed night, and shalom.
Shalom. We pray this video is helpful to your journey in the truth. Remember to be like the Bereans in Acts 17:11, who received the word with all readiness of mind, then searched the scriptures to see if what they heard was true. We have studies for the whole family, including children, every week. To learn more, visit assemblyofyahuah.com. Use the Join tab to express interest in participating. Use the Give tab to help support biblical assembly needs. To be notified of new videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Trust in Yahuah with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. Much love and shalom.